My name is Kelly. I was born in Chicago, didn't live there very long. Mostly grew up in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. I've been married for 37 years and have 5 children. I, I'm mostly a stay-at-home mom, raising my kids, and we did some homeschooling. Homeschooled most of them through high school, and currently went back to the working world and working part-time as a nurse in a clinic and do a lot of volunteer work.
Okay. And when did you move to the Pacific Northwest?
Well, I've always called Oregon home. Grew up in Oregon, went to grade school in Oregon and California, and graduated high school in Washington. So most of my family is back here in Oregon. When I got married, we traveled quite a bit because my husband did helicopter logging, so we would move every 4 to 6 months to various places across the U.S. But we always called Oregon home and wanted to come back to Oregon. So we've been back here in Bend for 17 years. So called Bend home.
And you had children?
And none of my children were born in Bend. A couple were born in Portland, and a couple were born in Iowa, and one in Colorado. So, and 3 of them are married. One is not, and the baby is still living at home with us.
Tell us about your son, the one who's in the military.
I do have one in the military. I didn't grow up in a military family, so I wasn't really sure what all that was going to mean. My father was in the military. He was a Marine, and he never really talked about it. I really don't know much of his history. I hope to someday be able to look up all that he did. He was in World War II in the Korean War, I know that. And he was maybe a gunnery sergeant. And I know he had shrapnel in one of his legs. He would not really ever talk to us about his experiences in the military, and we never really thought much of it. I do remember him maybe as a young child seeing him come home once in a uniform, but other than that, I don't have any memories of him being gone or anything in the military at all. So he must have got out when I was a very young child. But you know, they talk about PTSD now. Well, we didn't know it, but my dad had PTSD every day. He would take a nap. He rose early in the day and worked really hard, and then he would come home and take a late afternoon nap, and we would wake him up for dinner. And Mom would say, "Go wake up Dad, it's time for dinner." And we had to be really careful how we woke him up. We would walk in the room, and if you approached his body and tapped him to wake him up, he would hit the roof. He would just, he would just be instantly awake, and, don't do that. What are you doing? What? He would just be supercharged instantly. So we learned that we would just stand at the door and gently call out his name quietly and say, "Dad, it's time to wake up for dinner." And he wasn't mean or mad at us. It was just a reaction. Mm-hmm. So I have since come to the understanding, well, Dad had PTSD, and that was from being in the wars. And he did every once in a while mention things like foxholes and trench foot. So I know he saw some difficult times, but he didn't talk about it. He just didn't talk about it back then. So didn't have much of experience with the military. And then I have a brother who was in Special Forces, and he's a pilot, and he served in the military many years and retired. And he did lots of things, and I feel horrible to this day because I did not know. I had no idea what these military people go through, what they're experiencing, what their families are experiencing. I just felt really detached, like, oh, he's in the military. That's cool. Glad he's doing it. It's working out well for him. But then when you have a child that enters the military, suddenly as a mom, all things come to light and it becomes more real. And especially since we have had wartime, I'm sure everybody's opinions of the military have changed and we've all learned a lot. But I feel super guilty now that nobody recognized my brother for what he did, and I am so proud of him. And having been present when the troops come back from deployment, I have actually got to see that with my son. I have learned that there is nothing more heartbreaking than watching those troops file off that plane and seeing the one person walking around with nobody to greet them. It is devastating, and I didn't know that. I didn't realize what a big affair this is, and that everybody should have somebody there for them. So I carry that burden for my brother. There's multiple times he came home and had nobody meet him and recognize him. He lived across the U.S. I couldn't just drop things and go see him and do that. But know, Phil, that I love you and I'm so proud of what you've done and served your country well. And I try to thank him and everybody I know now on Veterans Day for all that they've done. And when my son entered the military, my brother Phil was a huge influence and a help for him because he had been there before and knew kind of what to do and how to do it. And when my son was thinking about entering the military, we had spoke to recruiters, and my brother was there to kind of protect my son and let us know that, the recruiters will tell you one thing and maybe promise you something, but you have to be very careful. They can't always deliver on those promises, that once you're in the Army or military, they're going to put you where they need you, and you might not always get your first choice. So it was really helpful to have other military people that were familiar with how it all worked to help us. And I'm grateful that we had my brother to give my son advice. And one of the things he advised was, go in as an officer if you can. That really opens a lot more doors for you, and you do get maybe your first choice of where you want to serve. And I mentioned that to my son when I was talking with him earlier today, that I learned that you have to be careful, those recruiters, and then it's good to go in as an officer because you get the benefits of being an officer. And he said, well, that's true, but going in as an officer, that's not for everybody. So you have to take into consideration what your interests are. Do you want to be in a leadership role, or do you prefer to do a technical skill, which you can go in as an enlisted, and that can work out just fine for you. It's just a matter of choices. So my son had decided to go in as an officer. So he went to college first and got a degree, and then he went to basic training. And through the wisdom of my brother, I learned that when those boys go to basic training and they graduate, there's a celebration, and you need to be there. So I tell all military moms now, it's like, oh, you have to be at graduation. Whenever there's a troop coming home or a graduation, you have to be there, because otherwise your son's going to be the only one without family there. Mm-hmm. And so no matter what the cost, it's worth it. You have to be there. So I know it's expensive and we didn't have a lot of money, but you need to be there. You need to be there for support. It's huge. So I was able to go at his officer candidate school graduation, and I think my husband also went to the basic graduation, And you're pretty proud as a mama. It was a really neat experience. And just enjoyed seeing all the other graduates, and people would come up to you and tell you great things about your son and congratulate you, and it really was nice to know and meet other people that were there supporting my son and were in the same boat, and they are a brotherhood, and they are there, and they're closer than family. And that was so reassuring to me as a mother. It's like, I know that man standing next to my son right now would die for my son and give his life. And they stay in contact, and they support each other's families. And so that was really reassuring to me, being all the way over here in Oregon, and there's my son all the way over in whether it was Fayetteville or Georgia or where the Carolinas, wherever he was, I could know that he had good men looking after him and being a role model for him.
Was your brother able to attend, or did he see him graduate?
Oh boy. Did he attend? I know my brother has been there for my son a lot. I can't remember exactly for what things he's been there for, but he's been there because my brother lives in Tennessee, and Trevor was over in that area for training, and so my brother and him could get together, like Thanksgiving, my son could go to his house, stuff like that. So it was really a blessing to have a family member over more towards the East Coast, so he could have somebody to go see and get support. And I know my brother helped him a lot and talked to him, and somebody he could relate to. My husband served as a Marine. He didn't have to serve in wartime, but they're two different branches. They had two different fields, and my husband was a great support too, but my brother was active military at the time, so I think my brother was just a real good support for him, and they've just been close. My brother used to babysit him when he was a baby, so he's been a great guy to the family.